Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Dan Ginader is a doctor of physical therapy based in Midtown Manhattan in New York City. He is widely recognized for his popular social media content, where he explains the common causes of aches and pains and offers simple, actionable ways to address them. With millions of followers across various platforms, Dan remains deeply committed to his in person practice, where he treats a diverse range of patients, including professional dancers and Broadway performers. Over nearly a decade of experience, he has worked with manual laborers, corporate professionals, athletes, singers, actors, among others. This broad experience enables Dan to connect with people and provide effective care from people of all walks of life. He is the author of Pain Free Body: Simple Stretches and Exercises for Common Aches and Pains, which will be released in December of 2025. The Pain Free Body is your essential guide for addressing pain and discomfort the moment it starts. With clear illustrations and easy to understand explanations of common aches and diagnoses, this book helps you tackle pain at its root rather than relying solely on medication for temporary relief. You can find Dan on Instagram or TikTok at dr.dan_DPT. Dan Ginader, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's such an honor to host you. I'm sure many of our audience will be familiar with your content, which you've done an amazing job over the year. And I just want to, over the years, excuse me, I just want to start out by asking you, what is it like to work with Broadway dancers and performers? That must be pretty cool.
It's very cool. It's cooler than I could have imagined, and I never imagined that I would end up in a niche like this. But truly walking into the theater and getting to treat the cast and crew before the show starts, and then being able to leave and see the audience waiting to walk in and getting ready to see the people that you just worked on and seeing how excited they are to be there, like it truly never gets old.
That's amazing. What is something about a Broadway performer that the common person like myself would just not know or understand?
I think the biggest misconception is, pardon me, when people see a Broadway show, it feels so singular. It feels so unique. It's such a spectacle. It's 2.5, sometimes 3 hours long, and the live singing is so good and the live dancing is so good that I think a lot of people lose track of the fact that they do it 8 times a week, and they're doing those same movements 8 times a week. And if you see a show that has a lot of lifts and a lot of moves and a lot of dance, like that is a lot to do 8 times a week. And I compare Broadway performers more to professional athletes than I would any other walk of life. To me, the only other people that perform in prime time under the pressure of a live audience, doing repetitive movements like that, are professional athletes. And in a show, so currently the two shows that we work on as a PT clinic are Wicked and Chicago. Both shows have been on for and running for over 20 years, and a large portion of that cast have been in their role or in their track. It's not uncommon to have someone in their track for 3, 5, sometimes even 10 years. So to do all of that over and over 8 times a week and only ever get 2 weeks of vacation a year, it never really increases. There's no true off season. I don't think a lot of people appreciate the athletic performance that they're seeing, not just in the moment, but also the longevity of it.
That is absolutely incredible. I've heard both of those shows are amazing. I have not seen either one. Last year, I got to see Hamilton, which is my absolute favorite musical of all time. And you're right, man. The level of athleticism these guys have to do what they do on stage is insane. And I never really thought to think about like how many times they do that, and doing it mostly all year round would be absolutely insane. Keeping them healthy must be a tremendous responsibility for you and everybody you work with.
For sure. And especially around this time of year, as we're recording this, we are about to enter November. And in the months of November, December, a lot of the Broadway shows will start to pack their show week around the weekends. So Wicked, for instance, normally will do 2 shows on Wednesday, 2 shows on Saturday, and then one show the rest of the days with Mondays off. But because there's a lot more tourists coming to town in these months, now instead of doing the 2 shows on Wednesday, they're doing 2 shows on Saturday and Sunday. And so now they're doing 5 shows all in one weekend. And when you do that many shows that close together, and you have the increased pressure of the extra people in the theater and the increased crowds, then a lot of stuff can start to pop up.
That's incredible. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I love that insight. We absolutely love talking to physical therapists around here. And I tell most of the physical therapists that we interview, physical therapy to me kind of tends to fall into two different buckets. You have the kind of physical therapists that seem to give their patients the handout of the exercises they're supposed to do that have never ever been done in the history of handouts or basic exercises. Nobody ever does them at home. They maybe go in and have to do like the same like cookie cutter kind of program of your knees bothering you, so do this and do that machine and do this, and then we'll adjust you and then see you later. We'll do as many sessions as your insurance will cover. And you've certainly had a bit of experience in the medical industry as far as that goes, but you weren't like content to kind of hang out in that space, and you needed to kind of break out and find a different way to express yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey through physical therapy and what it was like to work in the medical system and really kind of break out of that kind of mold as far as I understand it?
Yeah, I've had a pretty cool progression in my career. When I first graduated school, I worked for what was at the time the largest physical therapy brand under one name. And it was very much your classic in network orthopedic outpatient clinic. This is where you get sent after going to see a doctor. This is where you get sent after, having surgery or something like that. And by the time I was done there, I worked there for about 2.5 years. I had been promoted to clinic director, so I had 6 employees under me. I was seeing upwards of 20 patients a day, sometimes 3 to 4 patients an hour. And just because of the lack of time that I had with patients, the only way that I could do the job is kind of like what you described is if I'm only given 10 to 15 minutes to spend one-on-one with someone, I give them stuff that would work in general, but may not be super applicable to their exact diagnosis. And so sometimes I was seeing someone for 12 to 14 to 16 visits when I knew deep in my heart of hearts I probably should have been able to figure it out in 5 or 6 visits if I just had more time with them. And by the end of those 2.5 years, I was so burnt out by the industry and I felt like it wasn't a sustainable way for me to work. It wasn't a good way to get patients better. And then I very luckily was contacted by a company called TX Team, and I was in Indianapolis, Indiana, in the moment or at the time, and they were specializing in opening up physical therapy practices inside large office buildings. And they had recruited me because inside the State Government Center of Indiana, which is this massive, beautiful campus right downtown, 8,000 daily employees coming in and out of the building, they had established a medical center and they had already hired a nurse practitioner and a medical assistant for more general care. And the state government center had partnered with this company to come in and establish a physical therapy presence. And their pitch to me was all my patients would be one-on-one for a full hour. Everybody would be in network because we've directly negotiated with their employer, and nobody has a commute to come see me because they already work in the building. And I was like, man, this is this is it. And then the service was so appreciated that within my first week there, I was booked out for 2 to 3 weeks. And I thought this was the future of physical therapy. I was like, we're going to the people, we're going to negotiate with their employer, we're going to be in network, and everybody's going to get better because just that increased one-on-one visit for an hour, I already was getting people better in 4 to 6 visits instead of 12 to 16. Um, and then now that is kind of how we do it. We're not partnered with an insurance company, but in our clinic here in Midtown Manhattan, we do take out of network benefits, but we're largely fee for service. But we do not negotiate. We do not budge. We see everybody one-on-one for a full hour, so everybody can get that full, unique, individualized attention that they deserve.
Yeah, wow. So when was that you got the amazing job in Indiana?
So I started in December of 2019.
Hmm.
And so I had 3 shining weeks or 3 shining months, give or take, of having the best job in physical therapy, what I was convinced would be the future of physical therapy. And then, as most people remember, the world ended after
It
those
did? What
shining months.
happened?
It did. There was a little disease that went around, and people stopped coming to work. So, being a physical therapist inside of a large office building went from being the best job in physical therapy to quite literally no job at all. And I went months without seeing someone in person. And in the inside of those months, I also developed a crippling TikTok addiction. I wasn't alone. There were many people like me. That being said, the screen time app on my iPhone at one point said that I spent 42 hours in one week just digesting content. And I said, that's probably maybe a little too much. And I had a little bit of a come to Jesus moment with myself. And I said, I either need to delete the app and seek professional help, or I just need to find a way to make this time that I'm spending on this app productive. And that is when I started posting content in May of 2020, and I just haven't stopped since.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, I have so much respect for all the people that had tons of time to create a lot of content in that time because some of the funniest things I've ever watched came out of that time. I don't know if you remember the video that one of a comedian made where she time traveled essentially to visit herself. She time travels from April to January to talk to herself and kind of like encourages her to like get invest in Zoom and this would be a good year to get a dog. And like the January version of herself was like, but we've got so much travel this year. How can we be able to have a dog? Like, well, no, you don't. Yeah, that's awesome that you decided to pivot. We kind of have a stigma around social media, but I've always, again, really appreciated people who are embracing it and kind of creating content. Did it take you long to kind of wrap your mind around, I'm going to use this maybe not so much for watching 42 hours of cat videos during the week, but I'm actually going to use this to kind of get a message out there and maybe develop a bit of an audience?
Well, at the time, I was so worried about my physical therapy job being more or less taken away from me because a big reason why physical therapists get into physical therapy is because we were always told that it's a very safe profession and people are always going to need it. You'll never be out of work. There's always demand. And all of a sudden, that just wasn't true anymore. And when that wasn't true, in order to help ends meet and also just in order to give myself something to do with the day, I started delivering food like in my time, I would start delivering food, and I was just in those drives. I was thinking, this is not a great way to make good money, and B, I'm not even using what I spent all this time to get to go to school for. I'm not using what I got my degree for. I'm not directly helping people in the way that I want to. And so I started looking at ways that I could do physical therapy online. And at the time, there was a huge rise in telehealth services. And I was like, well, this could be an option. But then at the end of the day, I can only get paid for the amount of people that I see, and it's not super scalable. And then one day in those 42 hours a week of scrolling, I saw this one chiropractor in Seattle post a video about neck pain, and it had 2.5 million views. And I was thinking, I think I could do this. I think one of my strongest attributes as a physical therapist is my ability to educate, and it's clearly working for this guy. All these views is pretty crazy just to talk about neck pain. But still, at the time, TikTok was largely like the jokes that you mentioned. It was memes, it was dances. There wasn't a lot of helpful information on TikTok just yet. And then I kind of just through boredom and through seeing that post and through just thinking of ways that I could continue to use my education in a way that was scalable, said, well, let's just give this a go and see how it works. And it took off in a way that I still sometimes have trouble wrapping my head around.
Yeah. So your initial intentions were just to kind of get some helpful educational videos out there and never really with the thought of I'm going to become, a multi-million person following like entity.
Yeah, the possibility was always there, of course. Because when you start social media, that's the enticing thing about it. When people start posting, they're like, "Man, all I need is like one or two videos to to pop off, and then all of a sudden, like I could be a household name." But when I first started, I truly just wanted to continue doing my job in a way that I could reach as many people as possible. And I remember just like the first time I got contacted by a brand just to like, can we send you a water bottle that you'll just keep in frame of the video? I was like, yeah, free water bottle. This is the greatest thing in the world. So it all happened very slowly and organically and over time. And it blew up into something that I knew technically was possible, but never ever expected. But yeah, when I first started, I just wanted to continue to use my education and continue to help people.
So yeah, that's super cool. This Nalgene bottle appears in every one of our episodes. They have not one time reached out to be a sponsor of our show. Unbelievable.
Maybe this is the one. Maybe,
This will
yeah,
be the
they'll
one.
see this one and all of a sudden you'll be sponsored. You'll see.
Perfect. Thank you, Nalgene. Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. And as you look back on some of your most viral posts, it's interesting to talk to other content creators. One in particular, I remember talking to at a low carbohydrate conference that I was attending, and he was like, I put so much time and thought into all these posts, and I try to make them super educational. And like my most viral post is a picture I took at In-N-Out Burger or something. You know what I mean? Like, how have you been able to, really get a lot of traction with also some very, very helpful information? Some of your most viral posts are about some really common issues of pain that people deal with.
The one thing I tell people is that social media at the end of the day will always be a volume game. You just have to continue throwing things at the wall and eventually something will stick, but you just never know what that thing will be until it ultimately takes off. And oftentimes I do have and the effect or like the feeling that the more time I spend with a video, the worse it does. And I think that also kind of ties back into the fact that people, whether they realize it or not, are very good at picking up what is genuine and what is in the moment and what is really happening in front of them. And if you take so much time to plan it out and write a script and edit it to the very last second and you produce it and you color grade it and this and that, then people kind of read that as a little sterile, and that's not what they're looking for when they're on social media. When you're on social media, it's a more personal relationship in my mind, and you should treat it like you're just in their house talking to them as a friend. And so my success, I think, came from I only use very basic terminology and very basic words. I describe things that are vague enough to apply to a bunch of people, but are also specific enough that it makes them feel individualized. And then all of the applicable things that I try to include in the videos are meant to be done in the home in a way that all you have to do is put down your phone and you can try them and just kind of see where it takes you. And so those are the three main principles that I try to make sure I have in every video. And when I do a good job of executing those three things, I find that the video does pretty well.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And yes, the authenticity, excuse me, really shines through in your content. So I really do love that. I wanted to talk about some of the particular posts that you've made that have gone particularly viral. One of them was about sitting down office chairs, something that a lot of people deal with. Can you tell us about that video?
Yeah, so I made a video about office chair butt, which is the phenomenon of people working a corporate job, becoming largely sedentary, and feeling like their glutes are just wasting away. And the goal of the video was your glutes are not wasting away because you're compressing them constantly with the office chair, which is kind of the thought. It's like, oh, I'm just squishing my butt to the point to where it's a pancake back there. The idea was if you are sedentary in general, it doesn't matter where you're sitting. You could be sitting in something very soft. If you're sedentary in general, you will probably see some sort of muscle atrophy. And then I also tried to include some very easy glute centric exercises that you could do that would fit just like in the workday. And it did, I think it did very well. But again, it goes back to a lot of people work an office job, and a lot of people that work office jobs may not move around as much as they should. And a lot of people that don't move around as much as they should are a little self-conscious about how much they exercise and what their body looks like. And so it's something that applies to large swaths of people. And if you can make it authentic and make it a little entertaining, and then give people some actionable things that make sense, then it tends to do very well.
Yeah, that's great. And that kind of, in my opinion, got a little bit worse during the pandemic anyway, because not only were most people sitting, but they were also sitting in probably new environments. Like rather than being at a desk that's made to be, more functional for sitting for 8 hours, they were now at the kitchen table or maybe on the counter. And so lots of different postural issues from different setups was kind of a big problem. And for some extent, probably still is today.
No, for sure. Especially right after COVID, the amount of people that I would see that it seemed like the main thing causing them pain was because they were working from home sitting on their couch and their laptop was in their lap and they were just, hunched over and looking down and spending 8 hours a day there. And then all of a sudden their workday was over and they stayed on the same couch. And so yeah, the working in those non-desk environments and kind of losing the habit of maybe you were used to going to the gym right after work and now you don't have a place of work to go to, and then also the gym is closed. And so yeah, that all led to all kinds of interesting kind of diagnoses.
Yeah, gotcha. Another video you made that went very viral was all about restless leg syndrome. Can you tell us about that one?
So restless leg syndrome can be caused by all sorts of things, but again, as a physical therapist, I look through things as a through a physical therapy lens. And so a lot of the medication I can't speak on because I'm not able to speak on any sort of pills or medication. A lot of the nutrition stuff I also kind of leave to the nutritionists. But one thing that you can work on in a physical therapy sense is doing nerve glides. And at the end of the day, restless leg syndrome, that itchiness, that just restlessness, that almost you don't feel super connected to your legs that you feel ultimately at the end of the day is a nerve issue. And the nerves can be caused, or the nerve irritation can be caused buy something like something missing in your nutrition, or maybe something that you would need medication for. But also one thing that you can do that is very conservative that you can do laying right in bed is do some nerve glides. And when I post about restless leg syndrome, two of the nerve glides that I will ultimately or mostly show is a nerve glide for the sciatic nerve, which is the biggest nerve in the back of the leg, and the femoral nerve, which is the biggest nerve in the front of the leg. And then a lot of times, even if it can't fully relax the legs or fully kind of get the person to feel relaxed, they do feel at least some sort of slight relief. And for some people, it's enough to kind of to get to the point to where you can fall asleep. So I try to kind of bring that up at least 3 or 4 times a year.
It seems super valuable for somebody that they can do at home. They can do it for free. They can just test it out. And you're right. Maybe it's not solving the issue completely, but it's at least giving them some relief. It's definitely a complaint that I hear about a lot. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you sharing kind of your journey, through influencing on social media. As we go back to your story on, your day-to-day work, how did that bring you to New York City, and how did you start working with Broadway actors?
So my girlfriend, who I am still with, we've been together for 13 wonderful years. She's the love of my life. Grew up in a very small town in Indiana. And the reason that I practiced for the first 5 years in Indiana, because after I graduated PT school, she was there in dental school, and I moved out there to be with her. She finished dental school, and then she got her orthodontic residency. Today, she's an orthodontist. And growing up in a very small town in Indiana, she always had big city dreams. She had always wanted to live in a big city. And then I grew up just north of New York City. So when we first started dating, New York City would be the city that we would come to visit, and we got comfortable here. And so when she got her orthodontic residency and became an orthodontist, she only applied to jobs in New York City. And when she found one, we just up and moved, and we moved to the Big Apple. And then luckily, I had just done a pretty big education contract for a telehealth physical therapy company where I made some videos for them, and they paid me what was at the time and still is like a large sum of money. So when I first moved to New York City, I didn't feel financial stress to find a job right away. I could kind of just get my feet on the ground and go from there. And about 2 weeks after I moved to the city, I got a DM from a woman named Brittany Mims, who owned a small physical therapy practice, but she had the physical therapy contracts for two shows on Broadway, Chicago and Beetlejuice. And she just sent me a DM that more or less said, "Hey, would you ever be interested in working on Broadway?" And I was like, well, that's an interesting question. And I've got nothing but time. I'll bite on this. I'll go in. Let's see what's up. And so a week later, I went in to meet her, and we talked for close to 3.5 hours. And we just really hit it off. We saw things the same way. And the reason she had reached out to me is because a lot of times shows on Broadway, they want somebody there on the weekends. A lot of times shows do two shows on Saturday, and they want a physical therapist there that can work in between the two shows on Saturday. And it can be hard to staff Saturdays every Saturday because people do things on the weekends. So she likes having a Rolodex of physical therapists that she can reach out to and fill in when needed on these weekends. And at the end of our meeting, I was like, well, the funny thing about working the occasional weekend is I've got nothing but time, and I'd love to work 40 hours a week. But at the time, her practice was basically being run out of what was essentially a WeWork for healthcare practitioners. It was a nice big space. There were a lot of treatment rooms. There was a gym area. There was a Pilates area, but every treatment room was available for rent for the hour. If you wanted to be in the gym, you could rent space for like 30 minutes or whatever it may be. So every time she booked an appointment, she would have to then make sure she could book a room to see that patient. And at the time, she had a physical therapy assistant that was working under 20 hours a week, and another physical therapist working about 10 hours a week. And so the scalability of it wasn't there. Uh, there was no clear path to how I could start and then grow into like a full caseload, but we really liked each other, and I had the financial ability to not rush into a job. And with my social media following, we kind of thought that this might work, and so we started working together. And it was 4 months after that we opened up our first true brick and mortar clinic that we're still at now. And it was a few months after that we got so busy we had to hire two new physical therapists. And all of a sudden, now we had an HR company and we can offer benefits. And then we hired more physical therapists. And now, about 3.5 years after that initial meeting, we are completely booked out in our clinic. If you want to be seen as a new patient, a lot of times there's a 4 to 6 week wait list at the quickest. And after our most recent hire, we also no longer have room to add in any more bodies to treat any more patients. We are full. And so to kind of go from no real clinic and no real path to all of a sudden a fully bustling clinic and now the need to expand in just kind of 3.5 years, it's been a fun and wild ride.
That's cool, man. I absolutely love that. And maybe I'm making assumptions here, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But working with professional athletes, I would assume that your career kind of before what you're doing currently was mostly like getting people out of pain, people that were already in pain and trying to recover them, versus again, what I'm assuming is you're working with people to prevent pain and maintain, strength, mobility, all those different things. How do you look at those two things differently?
Well, it's a correct assumption. So I played Division I baseball, and so I feel like having that level of athletic experience, I kind of knew what it was like to at least work with people that were operating at a very high level. But yeah, when I first started, it was very much reducing pain or just getting back to baseline, like getting back to the point where you can just walk in the grocery store. And so now to be at the point to where the people that I'm working on have to do such impossibly hard things. And also, they have no trouble going to the grocery store. They have no trouble going up and down stairs. They have no trouble with their activities of daily living. They're only having trouble with very hard things. And then also, because I see them on a consistent basis, we're there every week, it's we have this small thing and this small thing got better, but how do we prevent this from becoming a big thing? So there is a lot of prehab. It's a lot of focus on the warm up. It's a lot of focus on the cool down. It's a lot of focus on what they're doing for cross training. It's a lot of focus on even just like what they're doing on stage and things that we can kind of change or shape or mold that is still inside of their normal choreography or blocking. And so when you're working with someone that is that operational and that has access to that high level activity, it just takes, I think, a lot more creativity, and you have to look under a lot of different rugs to kind of make sure that you're addressing everything that can turn them into the fully optimal person that they're meant to be.
Never fully considered that because like the choreography would have to be altered to some extent and that would affect your work. That is absolutely fascinating. As you practiced for as long as you have, are there certain techniques that you find that you've been trained in are more effective than others for most of what you deal with?
So even in the clinic where I work, we have only great physical therapists. We have a very stringent hiring policy. If you're hired by our clinic, you're a really great physical therapist. And we are also working with the same demographics. We treat mostly dancers, performers, and yet if you look at the gym or you look in the treatment room, we do such different manual therapy techniques and we use different exercises and we kind of treat our patients even slightly differently. And so I've never been a believer that one specific manual therapy technique is better or one exercise is better than the other. I think ultimately the best thing you can do as a physical therapist is just treat everyone as an individual and be very focused on the education side of things. Because as you mentioned earlier, people are always going to do what they want to do anyway. And people, whether it's in the moment or not, are when you stop seeing them, they're gonna stop doing a lot of the specific things that you told them. And the longer that they go doing an exercise without being under your watchful eye, chances are their form is going to change and shape, and the next time you see them do the exercise, it's going to look a little different. And so, in general, the best thing you can do isn't a specific technique. It's just the education of teaching them why what they're doing is important, why what happened, and why or what they can do to prevent it in the future or get better. And so, sticking more broadly, if you're really good with the education and the broad stuff, I think you can do a multitude of different manual therapy techniques and exercises that end up getting the patient in the same space.
There. Yeah, that's a really good answer. One question we get all the time is around kind of flexibility, and I'll use this in quotation, quote unquote, stretching. How do you know when certain muscle groups need to have an increase in mobility or flexibility, however you want to think about that? And how do you know when that is actually not warranted and can actually make things worse?
Well, now that I work with a largely hyper flexible and hypermobile population, I very rarely give out any stretches, period. That being said, I do think that the stretch versus exercise debate is a little overblown because I think a lot of people, when they talk about it, they lose track of the nuance that you can do both. Like nobody said that you only ever have to just stretch or you only ever have to just strengthen. You can do both. And a lot of the research that shows that stretching can be detrimental is because especially static stretching can kind of reduce the amount of muscle power that you can develop. And then if you're doing static stretching and then going directly into some sort of athletic movement, you may be at an increased risk for injury. But nobody talks about how if that person feels really good after stretching and they feel like it helps, then all you have to do is give them the education that after you stretch, you do have to go through a warm up and you do have to go through some activation before you go out on stage or before you lift weights or before you do your athletic whatever. And as long as you put that little warm up in between, all of a sudden you then allow that person to do the stretch that feels good. And then you don't also put them at risk for increased injury. And then if you find that stretching is increasing pain, then just stop. Again, whenever you're introducing something, you should do so gently and you should do so softly. And you should give them the education that if this feels wrong, we're just not going to do it because it likely will not help. And I think if you just stick to those principles, then you'll be just fine.
That is so straightforward and simple. I absolutely love that. That's why you're so good at what you do. Absolutely love that answer. When it comes to the strengthening side of things, again, lots of different ways to approach this, but are there any like core principles that you tend to follow when you're giving somebody certain exercises to strengthen, certain modalities, certain, you know, variables that you can mix up like tempo, sets, reps, all that stuff? How do you think about any of those kind of like variables in a general sense, global sense?
In a global sense, one thing I learned working with dancers is they are very good at getting their body in certain positions and getting their body to look a certain way. But a lot of times they don't really know how they got there and they're not really cognizant of the muscles they're using to get there. And when I'm prescribing an exercise, the main thing that I try to get the person to feel is to feel the muscle that we're intending to work. If we're doing an RDL, I want you to feel the hamstring. I want you to feel the glute. If you're feeling something else, let me know and we'll try to make some cues so that you can feel it. If we're, doing a calf raise, like I want you to feel that specifically in your gastroc and your upper calf muscle. And if you're not feeling it there, we're going to try to find a way to feel it there. And so I think having that kinesthetic awareness of, oh, I am working the muscle that I'm working is step number one. And then step number two is a slow eccentric phase. I want you to not only feel the muscle, but I want you to move very cleanly through that descending or like through that lowering phase. And then three, I want you to have a clean, quick, concentric phase. And I think if you can feel the right muscle and you can stay controlled through that eccentric and then you can explode out of it in the concentric, then again, it doesn't matter the exercise that I give you. I could give you any sort of movement. And then if you're really good at understanding that those parts of your body, you can also learn a new dance move or you can learn a new lift on stage. And then through those principles of feeling the right muscle and then staying controlled and then exploding through, you're likely gonna have benefits through all kinds of exercises.
Got it. Yeah, that's great. You did mention this in passing earlier, and I know this isn't in particular, as far as I know, not your area of expertise, but you did mention nutrition. This is a similar kind of question. Globally, are there certain principles of nutrition that you find to be very helpful? I would assume that a lot of the things you deal with could be related to inflammation, where nutrition could play a part. Is there anything that you're kind of on board with, generally speaking, with nutrition tips and things?
The biggest thing that I've seen, at least on Broadway, is that nobody eats enough protein. And especially when I have a patient that is repeatedly coming to me with the same muscular issue, like let's say it's a quad issue, and we're doing all the soft tissue, we're doing the massage, we're doing the activation, we're doing the strengthening, and we've even looked at their choreo, we've looked at like what could be causing this, and they're still having an issue. Then all of a sudden it becomes a protein talk because we have to sit down and think, okay, we are getting this thing to loosen up. We are getting it stronger. We are activating. We've looked at your form. We've looked at your choreo. Like we're running out of things that it can be. How much protein are you getting in a day? And first of all, they don't know. And then we talk about what they're eating, and it ends up being close to 20 grams, 30 grams of protein.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. And then I give them the same talk that I just gave you at the start of this, where you are a professional athlete. You're doing the same thing over and over. Like you are taxing your body like crazy. And then I tell them that like your goal should be the same as every other athletic person, which is roughly, generally speaking, 1 gram of protein for every pound that you weigh or every pound of your ideal weight. And for the most part, they are 5 times below that. And the amount of people that I've had that talk with that even increased to closer to like 60 or 70 grams of protein, the the radical difference that they feel almost immediately is it's kind of crazy. And so protein is a big thing that I focus on, and then also just general hydration. And then if it becomes more complicated than that, I have no problem referring out to a nutritionist.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Those protein numbers are insane, man. I just had somebody tell me something I've stolen actually. Like basically, if you're hiring me to be your personal trainer and you are not eating enough protein, you are wasting your money. Like, sure, we'll be able to help you with stuff, but like that is such a low hanging fruit for most people. Where, yeah, like I commonly see that people are eating, 50, 60 grams of protein a day thinking they're doing a great job. And the protein sources could be incomplete and, have all so many other concerns with that. And you also think that like the protein that you consume is so satiating. If you make that your focus, it's going to weed out a lot of the other crap that somebody is probably going to be eating anyway. They might be eating and snacking all the time because they're so hungry because they're not having enough protein. So yeah, I think that's a great tip. So thank you for sharing that. Couldn't agree more. Tell us a little bit about the nexus of your book. How did it come about that you were going to write a book, and what made you want to design it to kind of set it apart from other books that have already been written on the topic?
So my book is called The Pain-Free Body. It officially releases everywhere on December 9th of 2025. And the idea behind the book is basically the same idea behind my posts, where I try to go through every major joint, every major muscle, outline the common sources of aches or pains, and then give you simple, actionable ways that you can start to address it. And the reason that I wanted to write a book was I've always wanted to take all of my general ideas and postings and put them in one small package. And also, I am a little concerned with the current state of AI, and I have already had my likeness stolen and used for ads of very not good products, if the product even exists. And I can only imagine that if this is happening now, that it would likely only get worse. And I wouldn't be surprised if people just in general stop trusting video almost in general. And so I wanted some sort of hardcover, tangible, real world object of everything that I talk about that could not be mistaken for anything else other than my genuine work. And if anybody was a little bit confused or not quite sure if what they're seeing in video form is me or not, I at least wanted to have some sort of reliable text that cannot change and cannot be deformed that they can rely on.
That's awesome. Yeah, Victory Belt is the publisher. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, one of my favorite publishers. I've got about 5 of their books sitting about 6 inches from my head right now. And I've noticed as I've interviewed some of the authors of some of these books, it seems like a bit of a trend where they will come to a potential author and say like, "Oh, you should write a book. You'll be great at it. It's not that hard." And then people realize like a few months in, like, "Wow, this is a lot more work than I thought." Is that a similar story to what you experienced?
It is a lot of work. It's a ton of work. So yeah, Victory Belt is what I would consider to be the premier publisher in my space, in the health space and fitness space. They also make like a lot of health focused cookbooks. And so when I got an email from Victory Belt asking if I'd be interested in writing a book, it was the quickest yes I've ever said in my life. And I was humbled and honored to have received the email to begin with. But that being said, it was roughly 8 to 10 months of, so I work in the clinic every Monday through Thursday. And so I was taking 5 to 6 hours a day every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and writing for 8 or 9 consecutive months. And the burnout hit about halfway through because I was still making videos. I'm still working. I'm still in the clinic for over 40 hours a week. And now I'm taking all my free time and kind of dedicating it to writing this book. So it's hard. And then now, even that the book exists, I just got my very first copy just last week, and I got to hold it, and it's so cool. But now, even that the book exists, it's really hard to sell something. And it's really hard to educate people on how this could be helpful to them. And even though I'm not, sitting and writing, I'm still doing a whole bunch of stuff to kind of spread the word and get it out there. And so the work hasn't quite stopped yet, but it's all worth it. I'm super proud of it, and I hope it ends up in a lot of hands.
Yeah, that's awesome. At least it's not like 20 years ago where you'd be doing like a countrywide tour and signing books and speaking engagements and that kind of thing. But yeah, I love the idea. Like I said, I really love the publisher. Speaking of health cookbooks, they've given a lot of space for people in my space with like carnivore diets. There's several books that they've been able to make that talk about carnivore diets, and that's kind of a somewhat controversial topic these days. And so to be able to give space there is pretty awesome. And the way you structure your book, I believe, is part by part, and you kind of start with the lower part of the body and just work your way up. Is that how it's structured?
Yeah, so the table of contents is an anatomical model. One side of the table of contents is just a model of the lower body. One side of the table of contents is the model of the upper body, and there are page numbers pointing to the different areas. And so you can look at the table of contents, find the area you're in pain, jump straight to that area, and then, for instance, if it's the knee, when you first get to the knee section, it's broken up in between pain in the front of the knee, pain on the inside of the knee, pain on the outside of the knee, and pain on the back of the knee. And then in those subsections are 3 to 4 of the most common things that can cause pain there. And then at the end of each section, you'll be directed to self massage techniques, mobilization, stretches, and exercises for those diagnoses to kind of get things rolling on the right track. So it's very much you're meant to go to the table of contents. You're meant to find, hopefully, very easily what you may be dealing with, and then also easily find 2 to 3 things that you can start doing. And then if those 2 to 3 things help, then you'll know exactly how to kind of carry it out moving forward.
Amazing. And it is written to the lay public, correct? It's not necessarily written to like the professional. This is for everybody out there.
It is for anybody and everybody. And again, I did that for 2 main reasons. One, that's how I've made a name for myself, is making content for anybody and everybody. And two, a lot of these books, a lot of these great books, published by Victory Belt, are written for the professional, or written for the hobbyist, or written for people that already have a niche interest. And it's not necessarily meant to be digested by the average person. And so I took extreme care in making sure that you could have no knowledge of the human body at all and still get something from this book. But also, I wrote it in a way that if you are that hobbyist, or you do have that niche interest, the information in there is still valuable enough that even if the language is a little simple for you, the overall advice and the overall implementation of the things is hopefully still applicable.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Maybe we could close by just, maybe highlighting some of the areas that you write about, and maybe you could come up with like one kind of issue that you commonly see in the area, and maybe one or two kind of tips or tricks or fixes. I wanted to start with the foot, something we deal with a lot as far as people having a lot of pain, a lot of issues that tends to kind of travel around and cause other pain in other places. What is something really common that you see with the foot, and what are one or two common kind of fixes or tips or tricks that can help most people?
Well, the most common foot pain, I would say, is a case of plantar fasciitis, mostly known for it causing a searing pain in the bottom of your foot, right around the heel with your first step in the morning, increased pain with increased walking, and pain that reduces when you're in some sort of like soft supportive footwear. When you're experiencing some sort of plantar fasciitis, the first major thing that you'll hear is to roll it out. Either roll it out with a frozen water bottle, or you can roll at the bottom of your foot with a lacrosse ball or something like that. And that's really great for kind of reducing symptoms. And rolling out the bottom of your foot with a lacrosse ball is very much in the book because it is good at reducing those symptoms. But the thing that doesn't get talked enough about is increasing the strength in the bottom of your foot, and then also increasing the strength and flexibility of the lower leg. For the most part, the foot ends up being this catch all of weakness or overcompensation or trouble further up the chain. And the first place that is right above the chain of the foot is the lower leg. I've never seen a person with plantar fasciitis that isn't also tight and weak in the calves. And so, for the most part, I have a strong belief that I could take a plantar fasciitis person, never ever touch the bottom of their foot, and only work on the lower leg and get their lower leg stronger and more flexible. And then by way of that, you remove the stress that's causing the plantar fasciitis, and then all of a sudden their foot starts to feel better without ever having to touch it. And so That's kind of what the book is here's this thing you've heard of before. And then here's this rolling out thing that you've also heard of before. But then we take it one step further by saying, well, you should also be working on this and this, which unfortunately doesn't make it into like a lot of the more normal things that are prescribed for plantar fasciitis.
Got it. And you will talk with somebody and make recommendations about certain footwear that they should be maybe transitioning into?
Yeah, so I may not, in terms of physical therapists, I probably don't have the most common viewpoint when it comes to footwear. I myself wear a size 16 shoe. If anything, I'm closer to a size 17. A lot of the shoes that are made do not come in my size. And so, through that lens and through that bias, I generally blame footwear last. That being said, if somebody is having toe discomfort or ball of the foot discomfort, or I know that there's somebody that spends a lot of time in heels, or I know that they're running in a shoe that may not be for them, then of course we have a conversation. But for the most part, I I I blame shoes last because at the end of the day, I am also of the belief that your foot should be able to tolerate being in any number of different shoes. Like you shouldn't have to be reliant on an external source to fix a problem that is only internal. And so I try to take everything as far as I can, and then at the end of the day, if footwear seems to be something that can help them, then we start to have that conversation.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Moving up a little bit, can you tell us a little bit about common causes of lower back pain and you know general tips and tricks that can help most people?
So lower back pain, in the book, I ultimately bring everything down into three main buckets. I have a back pain that primarily worsens with prolonged or just in general rounding. So sitting for a long period of time, bending over to pick something up, things of that nature. I have a back pain that primarily worsens with extension. So either leaning back or standing for a long period of time or walking for a long period of time. And then I have a back pain that just seems to be generally irritable and doesn't seem to respond to bending or strengthening or extending. And then when I'm dealing with back pain, I try to get the patient as strong and as capable as possible inside of a neutral spine. I don't like to try to strengthen through moving the spine until I know for sure they can handle something as simple as a side plank or a bird dog or a dead bug. And then once you're there, then we start to maybe progress into something like a hinge, where you're still keeping that neutral spine, but we're doing maybe an RDL where you're getting the movement from the hips. And then once you can do that, then we start kind of having the conversation of, well, how do I tie my shoes again, and how do I begin to bend again? So for the most part, I think back pain just comes from being largely sedentary, maybe not working the muscles that you're meant to be working when you're exercising, or just overloading too quickly. And then by following the roadmap, we try to create a fully strong, mobile, and pain-free spine again.
Awesome. Yeah, that's totally reasonable. I love that. Starting with some of those static moves before progressing into things where you're moving. And then the last joint I wanted to ask you about that can be quite problematic, and you've probably have some experience with being a baseball player, is the shoulder. Shoulder girdle, quite complicated. What are some really common causes of pain and things that people can be thinking about there?
The shoulder is kind of my baby. So in my Division I baseball playing experiences as a pitcher, my right around my sophomore year, I did end up tearing my rotator cuff and my labrum, but I did not find out about it until the start of my senior year. Um, and so having that experience of still having a tear in my rotator cuff, still having a tear in my labrum, that is the area where I've spent the most attention. That's the area where I feel most comfortable. And for the most part, people that are experiencing a shoulder discomfort, it is coming from something, it is at least tangentially related to your rotator cuff. Your rotator cuff is a group of four muscles that can encapsulate the humerus in a way that when they're all active and all firing together, they provide the stability. And if they're not firing all together, then you can no longer move the shoulder the way it's meant to be moved, and you no longer have access to that same stability or same strength. And so in the same way that I've never seen a plantar fasciitis patient that didn't have tightness or weakness in the calf, I've never seen a shoulder pain patient that is fully strong in the rotator cuff. And so, for the most part, if you have shoulder pain, we will be starting by getting that rotator cuff to get as absolutely strong and capable as possible. And then whatever's left will go from there.
External rotations, sword draws, things like that.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So
Just kind of
3 out of the 4 rotator cuff muscles are external rotators. And so the easiest way to educate a person, again, going back to getting them to feel the muscle it's meant to be working, the easiest way to get them to feel it is by doing that external rotation. But if you've been on the internet long enough and you see people talking about rotator cuff and external rotation long enough, I'm sure you've seen videos of people that say that external rotation is not the only way. Like you can't be doing external rotation. And again, it comes back to the nuance of, well, external rotation really is a good way to get somebody to feel how they're using the rotator cuff, get them to feel what it feels like to fully contract the rotator cuff. But then, yes, we also do need to educate the shoulder or the rotator cuff on how to fire and just maintain stability. So then we add a little bit of external rotation, and then you maintain that external rotation as you take that shoulder through a range of motion. And then we can progress to something like an overhead kettlebell carry, or even just like in a plank position and then tapping your shoulders so that you're only bearing weight through one arm and not the other. And so there's a lot of different ways to kind of get after it. But yes, I do like starting with the external rotation just for that education of here's what it feels like to contract those muscles.
got it. Man, Dr. Dan, this has been an awesome conversation. I've really enjoyed this. There's been a lot of practical things that people can take away from this. And just like your content, it's very, very accessible and hopefully gives somebody hope who's experiencing pain, or your book even sounds like a great resource just for anybody to have around for the time that they are going to be in pain for one reason or another. So, so grateful for you and all your content. If you don't mind, tell us where we can find you to connect with you and your work, and where people can also find the book as well.
My 2 main platforms are Instagram and TikTok, and my handle is at dr.dan_DPT. And then the book is called The Pain-Free Body, and it is currently available. Well, it's available everywhere December 9th. You can pre-order it if you're listening to this before December 9th at any major book retailer. And then if we do a good job of spreading the word and telling everybody, and all the physical retailers will have them in person after December 9th, but you can still Amazon, Target, Walmart, whatever you prefer.
Got it. Awesome. Well, we will link that up in the show notes. And like I said, this has been an amazing conversation. We would just really appreciate you and your content and everything you've gone through in your journey to then come out on the other side and share this with people in a way that is very democratized. It's pretty awesome. So, Dr. Dan, thank you so very much for everything you do. And thank you for taking time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.